Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a video looking at all the latest technical BS that Phil has had happen to him here since he's got this new setup for his system. Now I've been gone for a while. I'll discuss that at the end of the video. What I want to do here is I've got my script next to me, what we're going to be following today. And what we're going to look at is basically the Skytech Gaming PC. I am not going to be touching the Wi-Fi portion of the issues that Phil has with his setup as it pertains to his RGB and everything. That's going to be done in a later video. What I want to look at today is basically just the camera issues he's having, the USB issues, the microphone problems he's run into with the clipping and everything, the bad AI, background removal that he uses. We're going to talk about Darziak doxing himself. Darziak basically subbed to my channel. He's been giving Phil information that has caused even more grief because Darziak doesn't understand what he's doing either. So we're going to look at all this. Now, you're probably wondering, Prophet, why does your desktop background look different? Why does it look like an actual base Windows 11 install? That's because it is. Now, I wanted to get this as close to possible to match Phil's setup. I didn't want to do any tweaking to my system because Phil doesn't, right? Phil doesn't adjust his power management settings. Phil doesn't disable HAGs. He doesn't use TCP IP optimization. He doesn't disable CPU core parking. There's a lot of stuff that Phil doesn't do that he should. And what I want to do with this setup is basically, with this video, I want to get this as close to possible as what Phil uses for his streaming setup to show where everything went wrong for him, right? And of course, I will show how to fix the issues. So if you're having similar problems, if you're having USB crosstalk issues like Phil does, there's going to be stuff in here that you may want to look at purchasing or may want to look at fixing on your own system. Now, just to go over a few things here really quick, these are the drivers that I'm currently using in this system. So if you want to follow along with me, right, or if you want to update your own drivers, you can go to the Station Drivers website. That up here. Station. Oops. Drivers. This is where I get all my drivers from. So all my updates and everything like that. I like to look at this daily just to see what's available. Like we've got new BIOS updates from yesterday, some Intel related stuff for their MPUs. So things like that. You can get most of these drivers from here. Now, Phil doesn't do this, so Phil isn't using like the latest Nvidia Game Ready driver. This is my monitor driver. I have a discrete sound card, so I don't use onboard audio, so all this is disabled. Now, let me bring up this really quick. Now, because in my system, I don't use USB, I use Thunderbolt. So these options right now, I do not have installed. Prophet OS is not being run, TCP IP optimization is not being run, I'm not using the Windows 11 Ultimate Power Plan, and I'm not using Thunderbolt. Everything else on this system is installed. All these other drivers are installed on this system. I don't use USB because I don't want to run into USB crosstalk problems, so I use Thunderbolt. I use what's called the Cal Digit Hub. Let me bring this up here for you. Products. Docs and hubs, the Element Hub. This is what I use on my system. This is the Element Thunderbolt 4 USB 4 Element Hub. This gives me 90 watts per port. We will discuss hubs when we get to that with Phil's issue because Phil uses a really, really, really bad hub. So this is what I use. So it's got 4 here. It's got Thunderbolt and everything. This is all capable of 20 gigabits each port for data transfer, as well as 90 watts of charging. But again, I'm not using that right now. I'm using a USB hub from Vantech for this setup. So let's get started. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the video where Phil does the unboxing of the Skytech Gaming PC. Then we'll actually look at the Skytech Gaming PC itself.
And it's heavy. Oh, yes. Here it is. Here is the beast. The new beast.
Now, I apologize for the quality, the image quality of this video. This is, of course, done on Phil's setup itself, not using the new streaming PC. Of course, this is done using his prior PC, which is the gaming PC, which we will take a look at when we get to that portion of the video. Now, the video is grainy. This is actually what Phil's stream actually currently looks like as well. I'll explain why. Now, looking at this system here, we can see that this is the Skytech Omega 2. Now, I've contacted Skytech because I wanted to know what they provide exactly in the system, like part for part. Now, I did the same thing for Phil's gaming PC. I have all that. That's going to be done in a different video. Skytech couldn't give me any of the information because Skytech doesn't guarantee what is inside the PC. It's like for like, okay? Now, the issue with this is kind of like a double-edged sword. When you're buying from a company like an AIB, if they're not going to guarantee you the same part, don't buy from them, okay? Now, with this system here, we could take a look at, this is a Gigabyte motherboard. It's a B650MC V2 revision 1. And we can actually bring this up. We can actually look at the gallery here. Or it's actually, yes, this is correct. Okay. And you'll be able to tell when we start looking at, when Phil shows the back I/O port, it matches this identical. So we know that this is the Gigabyte B650MC-V2. We will get into this. I will explain this motherboard and why there's a lot of misconception that this is a Lemon PC. It's not. It's just not what Phil should have purchased. And when Phil originally made this, was going to buy this PC, when he came on his stream and he was talking to the Dents about, which computer should I buy? He had like 3 systems picked out for streaming. Unbeknownst to the Dents, Phil had already purchased this, right? This was an impulse buy. Do I think Darziak or even possibly Arturo Sanchez had a word in Phil's ear on what to buy? Possibly. But all 3 of them then would have fucked up. Okay, so basically, this is the Skytech Omega gaming PC, the Omega 2, right? It's an AMD Ryzen 7700X. It's got a Team Group 360mm AIO. I've actually parted this out, basically to show you the price. Now, unfortunately, they don't make this motherboard anymore. They have a V3 version, which is actually technically better than the one that Phil has in his system. Also, the Zotac gaming card that is supposed to be in Phil's PC, these cards are way overpriced currently. This is the white version. Because of the supply constraints when it comes to like the new Nvidia video cards, all video cards right now are extremely overpriced. This card is now currently going for $1,000 US. It's not worth $1,000. Do not pay it. This card should only be about $400 to $500 American. So that would put this at around $1,227. Phil paid, because he bought this during a Black Friday sale, Phil paid $1,579, so $1,600 USD. They charge currently $1,929 for this system. You can build this system, like I said, for $1,200. No problem. You can get a better motherboard, you can get a better graphics card to get this price. So do not buy from Skytech. This is a bad price for what you are getting. Also, again, Skytech shows this with a Prime X670, and after I've contacted them, they changed this. They added this to the website that the product image does not match what they actually sell in the system. Like, the case is correct, but the parts inside it are not correct, okay? Now, like I said, it's an AMD 7700X, 32 gigs of DDR5, 5200 megahertz, which is pretty slow. I wouldn't sell a system with less than 6000 megahertz DDR5 for an AMD build, even an Intel build. I wouldn't do that. It comes with a Kingston this one right here, the NV3. This is not a good hard drive. It's below the PCIe Gen 4 performance spec. It comes with a GeForce RTX 4070 Super. I will get into this within the Nvidia Matrix to show you why this isn't a good fit for Phil. It comes with the Thermaltake Series 500 ATX mid-tower case. Now, the power supply I've chosen is a gold certified. The power supply that comes into this system is like an AliExpress off-brand ripoff. It's called CyberMax. I've never heard of it, and I cannot find any information online for this. If you look up the Omega 2, this model number for review, especially for YouTube videos, you will find multiple different builds of this system. They're all the same, the 7700X, the 32 gigs DDR5 5200, the 4070 Super, but the 4070 Super can differ by brand. The motherboard, I've seen it with Asus, ASRock, and currently they're using Gigabyte. I've seen it with MSI, Saprin, NVMe drives, but they've all used the same 750 watt gold branded. But it's this CyberMax. I don't know I don't know who they are. I've never heard of them. So with Phil's system, this is the motherboard that's in the unit. Okay, now this motherboard, let's just break this down really quick. I'm going to show you why it's not like, it's not that it's a bad board. It gets the job done, but it is extremely low end. Okay, so basically support for DDR5, right? Support for AMD processor 7000, 8000, 9000 series. Gigabit LAN, right? Realtek onboard audio. Unfortunately, the Wi-Fi in this system, especially for a system purchased in 2024, I would have liked to see come with at least Wi-Fi 6 or Wi-Fi 6E. Unfortunately, this comes with Wi-Fi 5 and Bluetooth 4.2. So we'll get into this portion more when I do the Wi-Fi network RGB video. Looking at the PCI Express, especially for a system again sold in 2004, the CPU, so we can actually bring up, what is this? Gigabyte. Let me bring this up here for you guys. We're going to bring up the Gigabyte E650M-C block diagram. Now, when you're purchasing your motherboard, you should look these up, actually. See if we can find it here really quick. Here it is. Now, with the block diagram for these motherboards, this basically tells how things are separated for the system, okay? The problem with the block diagrams is they do tell you how stuff is divided up. So on the CPU, especially on AMD systems, on Intel systems, there is no onboard USB control, like native USB support. That is all done through the chipset. Within the AMD system, they do have USB support because it's not a monolithic die. Now, Phil's system doesn't support PCIe Gen 5, so we can take that out right away, right? That doesn't, this is for a B650E. Let me see if I can find, let me see, B650M-C. Bring up the motherboard manual. So it should be in the motherboard manual. Support. Come on, Gigabyte. Manuals. This one. Setup. BIOS setup. Features. Maybe they don't supply the manual anymore. That's great, Gigabyte. Really good. Okay, so they don't supply the manual anymore. So with Phil's system, we know that he doesn't have PCI Express 5, right? So the system only supports PCI Express 4. This is what's supported on the CPU itself. Now this supports PCI Express 4. There is a M.2 that supports PCI Express 4, and there's an M.2 that supports PCI Express 3 through the CPU. Now, this isn't good. Now, let me bring up a picture of Phil's system here, as we'll get more into this. So this is Phil's motherboard here. So this is your Gen 4 PCI Express slot. These are also PCI Express X16 slots, but they only run at X1 unless you adjust PCIe bifurcation. Now, there's an M.2 slot here. This is also on the CPU, but this is PCI Express 3. Phil currently has a 990 Pro plugged into this slot here, which means that 990 Pro requires a PCI Express slot of Gen 4 X4. This is a PCI Express slot Gen 3 X2, meaning that the NVMe drive is only going to run at about 25% of its rated speed, probably less. So Phil is bottlenecking the 990 Pro because he has it plugged into here. Now, if he had it plugged into here, it would be even worse. That's because this is PCI Express slot Gen 3 at X1 only. So good thing Phil didn't plug it into here, because that would cause even worse performance. Phil has the 980 Pro that he replaced the Kingston with, is plugged into this M.2 slot here, which is fine. It's functioning normally as it should. Technically, Phil should be using the 990 Pro for his operating system and his 980 Pro for the backup for his local recordings. The 990 Pro, of course, is faster, has more max IOPs, so the system would feel more responsive. Now, when we look at this, so for USB layout, and this is where things are going to get a little bit dicey. Now, on Phil's motherboard, the CPU side supports USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A ports, red on the back panel. So that would be, get rid of this. So these are the two USB 3.2 Gen 2 A ports that support 10 gigabits. This USB-C port only supports 5 gigabits. This is only USB 3.2 Gen 1 and Gen 1. Okay, so, and this is through a hub, which realistically you don't want to be using the onboard hubs. They are kind of underpowered, so there's issues. Now, the other problem is that these black ports are only USB 2. So this is USB 2, this is USB 2, this is USB 2, right? That's pretty much what is supported on Phil's system. Now, Phil's front panel for the series, this is the Thermaltake Series 500. Okay. So this is the case that Phil uses. I want to find just the base model. Perfect. So the Series 500. So on this system, this only supports USB 3.0 on the front, as well as a Type-C connector, which is just a USB 3.1. And this will not function at the speed that Phil needs it to. So even though Phil has his cameras plugged into this, we'll get into that later. So this breaks it down that the USB support that Phil has on the system is pretty poor, and this causes issues for his camera setup, especially if he's going to be using 2 or 3 cameras. Now, the way USB works, let me bring this back up. So for power delivery, USB shares power, all right? And when you plug in a device, depending on how much power draw that USB port is going to need, it may disable other USB ports. Right? Now, Phil's cameras, and we'll get into that when we get to the camera section, require at least 5 watts of power per port. Now, because of the hubs Phil uses and because of the USB 2 that's on this board, Phil shouldn't be using any of these ports at all. He can use them for his keyboard and his mouse, that's fine. But I would not be using the cameras on any of these ports, especially on the front panels as well. They are underpowered. I don't like front panel connectors. On my system, I have an O11 Dynamic XL from Lian Li. Now, I have had tons, oh, not the Evo, this one here. I've had tons of problems with my front panel I/O, okay? Let me bring this up. So on my system here, I have, there's 2 USB ports. There's a USB-C and then there's USB 2 at the bottom. If I try using these ports, I get error messages all the time. Now, I've had Lian Li replace the front panel connector, have given me new boards for the front panel connectors. They just don't work, so I no longer plug them in. All right, I don't use that because I use the CalDigit hub. I have everything plugged into that. Now, on my main system, my desktop PC that I use for gaming, I only have a microphone plugged in, a keyboard plugged in, a mouse plugged in, and my mouse pad, because my mouse pad has wireless QI charging, which is charging my phone right now for me. That's all I have plugged in to my system. And then sometimes I have a controller plugged in depending on what game I'm playing. For my streaming PC, I do use a Vantech, but I'm going to be switching to a StarTech USB hub. And in that I have a microphone, a camera, my capture card, what else? Keyboard, mouse, my Stream Deck and everything, that's plugged into that as well. So, and that's all plugged in through one port on the back of my computer, then plugged in, and everything is plugged into that hub. That's the way it should be done. You want to try, like, especially for a streaming PC, you do not want to fill up all your USB ports. You're going to run into problems. And there have been detractors in the community, like Alt Insider for one, Logan K, they ran into issues with USB as well. Logan K and Alt have switched over to USB hubs, and now it's functioning properly, right? That's the way you should set it up. And again, Phil doesn't know this because Phil's an idiot. And remember, Phil ran into these similar issues on his old setup as well. He likes to lie about it now, that he says that he never had any problems with that computer for 10 years. No, he had problems with the camera, he had problems with the microphone, he had problems with capture cards. Like he said, his USB ports were dying. They weren't. They were just powering off because he was trying to pull too much power. Back then, Phil was using unpowered hubs, meaning that they took power from the USB port. He does have a powered hub now, but it's 10 years old, according to Phil, and it's called a J5 Create, and it is not a very good hub, but we will get to that in that portion of the video. So next up, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Elgato 4K Pro, and we are going to go over what happened really quick, why it didn't work, and how Phil could have fixed it instead of just blowing more money on another capture card. Okay, and we are back. Now, let's look at the Elgato setup that Phil did. Now, this is the Elgato 4K Pro right here. Phil originally purchased this when he got the new streaming PC because Phil wanted something he thought was going to be better because it was an internal card. Not really. There's reasons why you may want to have an internal card or multiple internal cards, especially if you're using something like the Sony AX700 camera. That has HDMI out, so if you want to use that camera as your webcam, a lot of content creators use that, like Maximilian. Phil was begging for this camera 3 years ago. He wanted the same camera that Maximilian dude had. This camera actually costs like 2,500 Canadian. Like, no one's gonna buy that for Phil, right? So, and again, like, most of the stuff that Phil says is donated is typically purchased by Phil. Now, this is the Elgato 4K Pro here. We're going to take a look at what happened to Phil when he tried setting this up.
That's all it says. Game Capture 4K Pro is what it says. None 4K. I mean, this is it. I don't know. Why is it so confusing? It's none of these. It's literally none of these. Like, what are you talking about? Look.
Now, there is a QR code on the box that all Phil had to do was scan, and it would bring up which drivers for him to download and the software.
Game Capture 4K Pro. That's all it says. It doesn't mention 60 at all anywhere here. This is Elgato 4K Pro, not Game Capture. All these are Game Capture, but it's not 60. So what the hell do I need to get? And why is it all different? Why don't they have just one that detects it?
And this is the gist of Phil setting stuff up, right? Now, again, Phil didn't need to install this software. And when we get to the camera portion, I'll explain why. It's too much of the same software being installed in the system.
No, mine does do 60, but that's not what it's called. It's called the 4K Pro. It's not a 4K 60 Pro. It's just the 4K Pro. So how am I supposed to know what the drivers are for it? I have no clue what to get. I guess just this. I guess just this. I don't know. I guess I'm going to try it. This might not even be it. This driver version is already installed. What? Great.
Now, the reason for this is that most capture devices will have all their software for drivers on board. Like, I use an EVGA XR1 Pro for my capture card. I don't need any drivers. I don't need any software. It just automatically works with OBS. Same as the 4K Pro. All Phil had to do was install the 4K Pro, open up OBS, do his capturing. But there is an issue that Phil ran into.
Claims it was successful. So now how do I get the software? Software? Okay. This is the latest one. Ugh. Oh, why is this so complicated? I gotta go, guys. I can only be here for like 10 more minutes. Seriously. So I guess the streak's gonna end because I'm setting up a new PC. Someone took the dollar and says, insert an HDMI cable into your ass. Gee, thanks.
Again, he's going to be here for another 10 more minutes, but this goes on for like another 40 minutes.
119 with 10 minutes left on the stream. Sound capture? I guess. I don't know if I'm going to use that. You saw my underwear. Little Shake and Bake, thanks for a dollar super chat. Or a super sticker, I should say. Okay, great. So is it installed now? Okay. Connect your capture device to get started. No capture device is found. Great. It's in. It's literally in. So we got a problem. Thanks, Little
Okay, so this goes on for quite a bit because it does eventually capture audio, but Phil cannot capture video. Now, the reason for this is it has to do with PCIe bifurcation. Now, what PCIe bifurcation is, all motherboards nowadays, when you have, like, we can bring this up again. Let's bring up Phil's motherboard. Okay. So with Phil's motherboard, because of how the PCI Express lanes are divvied up on his system, bring this up here. Actually, we'll bring up the picture of the motherboard so I can explain it better. So remember, on this motherboard, these ports here, this port, and this port, this is all Phil has for expansion for his system. Now, these ports here are blocked because of the GPU. This port is the only one available. Now, again, these three ports, the PCI Express X16, they only function at X1. Now, the Elgato 4K Capture Pro requires an PCI Express Gen 2 X2 slot to function properly. Where is... The specifications for this. HDMI 2.1, 4K pass-through, variable refresh rate. It's at the bottom. Hey, Corsair's website. Okay, so it requires a PCI Express 2.0 X4 slot. Now, this should function under a PCI Express 3X1 slot, no problem. But what Phil would need to do is Phil has to go into the BIOS. There's an option because he's using... The motherboards are set up basically for expansion for storage. So Phil has to change the PCI Express bifurcation from M.2 to X2, X2, or X4, X4, or X1, X1. There's an option in every BIOS for the motherboards to do this. This then changes the PCI Express lanes, and the capture card would have worked. Darziak and Phil did not understand this. They didn't know what to do, so they immediately assumed that either, one, the PCI Express ports were broken and the motherboard was broken, or two, the capture card itself was broken. They couldn't figure it out. We did while we were watching this live. I know Logan K and I were talking about it and everything, because Logan was restreaming this. This basically has to do because Phil just didn't understand. Every motherboard is like this. More higher end boards will have better options or auto detection options. So if you are using an expansion card, it will function. Like in my system, I use a discrete sound card, but I don't use more than one NVMe drive, and my NVMe drive is on my CPU, so I didn't run into this issue. If I had multiple drives in my system for storage, then yes, I'd have to go into my motherboard, adjust the PCIe bifurcation, and the Elgato capture card would have worked just fine. Phil turned around and bought the AverMedia Live Gamer 2.1, the new, it's like $400 Canadian, this capture card that operates through USB 10 gigabit. Phil currently doesn't have it plugged in through USB 10 gigabit, so he can't do 4K 60 capture, which he's not going to be able to do because his system's not going to be able to stream at 4K. We'll get to that. So this went on for quite a bit, where Phil got angry, was bitching, complaining and everything about why the capture card wouldn't work and why it's so difficult to set up. It's not difficult. I knew what to do. Logan knew what to do. A lot of people knew what to do, right? It all came down to PCIe bifurcation. And Phil and Darziak had no idea. We'll get into that with Darziak here shortly, because the next portion that we're going to be looking at is basically Darziak doxing himself, helping Phil set up OBS, and basically just completely screwing up the system. Okay, we are back. Now what we're going to be looking at here is basically how Darziak doxed himself, messed up Phil's settings. We're going to set up OBS ourselves here. I'm going to show you exactly what went wrong and why Darziak obviously didn't know what he was doing, and why you shouldn't do what Darziak did.
Letting me do that. That's disappointing. Okay, check the stream and recording settings. Good point. Let's take a look now. Yep, it does have some of my old settings here. Yep. Yeah, look, 1440. It's allowing me to do 14.
Okay, so this isn't actually 1440. This is being used with a down filter, meaning that there's a resolution set that's higher, and we'll get into that here because I think Phil shows this. This is what Darziak has sent Phil. Darziak sent Phil his own profile. Now, there's a reason why you don't do this, and we'll get into that shortly, but let's just go over these quick. Now, Phil isn't actually, like, this setting here right now is not 2560 by 1440 and 16,000 kilobits per second for HEVC. That is normal. Phil should be using AV1. He does change it to AV1, but a key interval, 2 seconds, no. If you're doing a podcast, that is fine, but if you're gaming, this should be set to 1 second. Now, the preset is set to slow, good quality. This is just default. realistically, you should be using 6 or 7 if you can. That does take a lot more GPU horsepower. Now, I need to preface this. Phil is currently setting this up. This is being set up on Phil's gaming PC. This is prior to Phil getting the streaming PC. There's a huge difference, and we'll get into that shortly, of why this was a bad idea. Because the 4070 Ti Super and the 4070 Super do have a very critical difference when it comes to streaming. And Darziak and Phil both had absolutely no fucking clue what they were doing when they were setting this up. The 2-pass full resolution, again, this is the best setting. 2-pass is full resolution because this checks for errors within the image and corrects them. Stronger a GPU will basically be able to do 2 passes full resolution, but it's going to use extra GPU power, and that's something Phil's streaming PC, the Skytech Gaming PC, can't really afford. Okay,
1940. So this is all good. This would be for the YouTube side, right? Recording would be Nvidia. I want both of these to be streaming, recording. The other stream would have to be the processor, correct? Oh, that's your account.
So here's the problem. Darziak set this up on his own PC and then sent this over to Phil. The screenshot here. So this is the Google Doc that Darziak had created for Phil using his own PC. Don't ever do this, okay? And here's why. Let's set up OBS right now. Now, the version of OBS that Darziak had Phil install was an RC version. There was a beta version, then there's the release candidate of version 31. Now, the problem with this is, at the time that they were setting this up, 31 had already been released. The latest version is 31.0.2. So let's install this really quick. You've seen me do this in the past. Move this over here for now. Now, when OBS is installing on your PC, it does a scan of your PC and it designates everything based on your hardware. That is your profile, right? So we're going to launch OBS now. And we'll do our initial setup for OBS.
Disconnect account. Yeah, that probably would be bad. That has your account in there. Okay, I disconnected your account. That would have been bad. I gotta put the plugin in to do the kick streaming. That's important. All this is correct. Audio bitrate. Yeah, this is good. I just want to make sure, what's the bitrate? What bitrate are we doing? I don't see that information.
Okay, so let's optimize for recording, or optimize for streaming. Recording is secondary. It's just default. I want to choose my monitor's resolution. Right, now you can change this later on. I'm just going to set this as, you know what, screw it. I'm going to set this as default because this is what Phil had basically done. Okay. Connected to a YouTube account. Okay, now I'm not going to estimate bitrate. I'm not going to do that just yet. Okay. So basically, once your system is set up, right, let's just do a quick setup here. So for my stream, I want to ignore stream settings. For my video, I want to make sure it is my monitor. Now you can do this, right? And that's just a manual setup. Now this is basically what dickhead Darziak did, aka the dragon fucker. and then that downscales your image. You really don't want to do that because that uses extra GPU cycles as well. Typically, you want to be at the same... I like to be at the same monitor resolution. Now, I am recording this in 4K on another PC because I have a dual PC setup, just like Phil, right? So 3440 by 14 or by 1440, 60 FPS. I'm going to go into my output resolution. Let's change this to advanced. Now for my recording, CBR is fine. I'm going to set this to 51,000 because I have a 250 megabit upload, so I'm allowed to use that. I'm going to set this to 1. Actually, I'm going to change this to HEVC. Now, with AV1 and HEVC, AV1 is a, I'm not going to say better encoder than HEVC. A lot of people, there's a lot of argument. HEVC is used for quality, while AV1 is used for compression. So if you're bandwidth limited, AV1 is your bestest friend, right? And Phil is bandwidth limited on his internet, right? We know that for a fact. So I use HEVC because I don't have AV1 support. I have a 250 megabit upload compared to Phil's 35 megabit upload, right? So I've got a lot more speed for my internet and a lot more overhead that I can use. Now I'm going to set this to 51,000. 1 second, because I want to be capturing gameplay. I want to make sure that this is either P6 or P7. But again, what should I do, guys? Like, what should I do? Because we got to prove the difference here. Let's just do what Phil did. Okay, so P5, 15,000 or 16,000, I should say. I'll leave it high quality, 2 pass full resolution, and then 2 seconds. Now, realistically, B-frames, I change that to 0 because that does kind of degrade your image quality overall. Let's bring Phil back up here. Now, this is being recorded. This is going to be the daily wrap thing when we get to it.
Yeah, I don't know what bitrate it's going to be recording at. I do 20,000 right now, which I'm okay with.
Okay. You never record in bitrate, okay? Never, ever, 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 ever record in bitrate.
Bitrate is under stream. You don't use bitrate for recordings? What? Don't? I swear I did.
Still did. It is true. 16-year content creator that doesn't know how to use OBS. And this is the prime example. Both Darziak and Phil don't understand how OBS functions. Now, Darziak hasn't been around as long as Phil. Phil's been using OBS since 2013, so it's 12 years. Phil never understood how OBS actually worked. He never bothered to research it. He never bothered to ask people how it actually functioned. Phil just bigger number better, right? So Phil recorded in CBR at 20,000 kilobits per second. You don't do that. For recording, you use constant QP or CQP, and the default is 20. 14 is considered lossless. That's what I recorded. I wouldn't go above 27. That's when image quality really starts to degrade. And again, this should be 1 second, not 2, when you're recording gameplay. P6 or P7 is better, right? Because that's going to give a better preset, better image quality and everything like that. B-frames, again, I would set to 0. Look ahead is now enabled by default in OBS. Bring this up here. So all this is enabled now by default. Okay, so this is Phil's streaming settings. So we're going to keep this the way it is. His recording settings. Make sure it's hybrid MP4. You do want to use this. Use Nvidia HEVC. We're going to use constant QP of 20 to E6. High quality to pass full resolution. And that's what we're going to set up for now.
I swear I did. I swear right now I use bitrate. Hold on. I don't know. Something's wrong there. Settings. I'm going to check right now. Output. Recording. Absolutely. Bitrate 20,000 kilobits per second. So something has definitely changed because I do select my bitrate right now, but I'm assuming things have changed. Yeah, it would have been in here. It's not here anymore. Okay. So I guess I'll go with this and see what happens. It's going to be interesting when I try to do this. I have no idea what I'm doing. So literally tonight, if I wanted to, I could broadcast on the new PC. The problem is I still need to get all the files off the old PC.
Okay, so let's just recap really quick what Darziak did. Darziak gave access to his own profile. Now, if I bring this up, we go to profile. Where is it? File, show profile folder. Now, open up. If you open up these folders or these files here, this is, you can open this up using Notepad. Okay, now these settings and everything here are your basic setup for your OBS. Now this is based on a scan of your PC, what your PC hardware is, and OBS will then configure some settings in the background. Darziak transferred Phil his own profile, which is not the same as Phil's PC. This in turn loads the profile based on Darziak's PC. Now you're understanding what I'm talking about here, right? This wasn't going to be compatible properly with Phil's PC. Now, because Phil is using his gaming PC during this video to set up, this causes an issue when Phil transfers it over to his streaming PC once he gets it. Now, this video is from December 31st, 2024. This is on Phil's new PC. Now, you see how grainy everything looks? I've got this set to 1440p. I'm using Phil's own stream for this because I don't want to... I want to show exactly how bad Phil has set this up. Now, what happened when Phil transferred this profile over to his gaming or his streaming PC? Let's have a look.
That my GPU is being overloaded. And I'm like, this hasn't happened with any other game I've played. I've been playing Call of Duty, Stalker, Indiana Jones, everything. Not a single game has given me issue. So what is going on? So I went into Task Manager. You know, I Control-Alt-Deleted, and I checked it out, and it actually said my GPU was at 98%. And I was...
Now, why did this occur? So when you're looking at video cards for streaming, right, there are major differences. If you're going to be doing multi-streaming, recording at the same time, or even if you want to stream and game on the same PC, you're going to be wanting to look at the total number of NVENC encoders on the GPU. Now, there's a huge difference. Now, Phil's 4070 Super only has one hardware NVENC encoder, okay? For multi-streaming, or if you're looking to game and stream on the same PC, this is not ideal, okay? Phil's gaming PC that he originally set it up on has two NVENC encoders. The 4070 Ti and above have dual hardware NVENC encoders. This makes it easier on the system, right? It's not going to use as much because it can offload some of the encoding to the other secondary chip. That way you're not going to bottleneck your system. Before Phil transferred this over to a streaming PC, I think Phil was sitting at something like 50%. Once he transferred over to a streaming PC, it jumped to 98% because he didn't have that secondary encoder anymore, right? Again, Darziak didn't know what he was doing. Phil didn't know what he was doing. Now, we can mimic this, right? Close all this shit down. I'll do a display capture. Why not? Let's do display capture. Select the display, primary monitor. So now I'm capturing my display, right? Now if I hit, let's bring up, go to performance. Now currently I have a YouTube, I've got YouTube up and everything, right? So I'm kind of using my GPU. I've got 9% of my GPU used. If I hit start recording, Now, because I only have one GPU encoder, I have a 3080 Ti. Now, on the 1070, the 1080, and the 1090, and the Titan, going back to 10th gen, those all had dual encoders. So technically a 1070, a 1080, and a Titan 10th gen will outperform Phil's 4070 Super when it comes to raw encoding performance because it has dual encoders. On the 20 series and the 30 series, Nvidia kind of fucked us, and all the cards only came with one NVENC encoder. On the 4070 Ti, 4070 Ti Super, 4080, 4080 Super, and the 4090 all had dual, and the 4090 had a triple encoder. On the 50 series, the 5070 Ti, the 5080, and the 5090. 5090 again has three encoders. The 5070 Ti, 5080 have dual encoders. So with me just recording using Phil's settings, I'm already at 87%, right? Which isn't good. So what Phil had to do is during that stream on December 31st, Phil had to then go in and drop his quality for his streams in order for it to be able to do what Phil wanted it to do. Now, let's set this to Phil's 60 by 1440. So this is 2560 by 1440. Let's resize. Now, I don't want to stretch this because since I'm capturing in a bigger resolution, because my screen is a 3440 by 1440, it's not going to fit 2560 by 1440. I don't want to do any stretching or anything like that because it'll just blow the image out. It'll look like shit. Recording again. We can see that I'm at 65%. That's just recording. Now remember, Phil has to stream to Kick, which is going to be 1080p, using the old Nvidia NVENC because it doesn't support HEVC or AV1. And then Phil is also streaming to YouTube at 1440p. So Phil had to lower the quality of his streams, and that is why his stream looks so grainy now. And we can even see that in today's streams and everything like that Phil does. Quality just isn't there, right? Because he has to lower it in order to be able to multi-stream because his GPU just isn't powerful enough to do what he wants to do. Now, when Phil purchased this streaming PC, remember, Phil kept talking about future-proof, and maybe he will stream a 4K. He's not going to be able to, right? He's not going to be able to do 4K streaming to YouTube, 4K recording, and 1080p streaming to Kick. Phil would have to basically just completely cut back, get rid of Kick streaming entirely, no longer do the local recordings, and only stream at 4K with, let's see. If we go to recording, constant QP 20, probably lower this, probably go to a single pass, keep B frames at 2. File settings, video. So this is what Phil's probably going to have to go to in order to be able to stream at 4K. You can see just doing the local recording alone, I'm using 75% of my GPU. Now, the 3080 Ti and the 4070 Super are pretty much neck and neck. The 4070 Super might edge it out based on bandwidth just because of the higher memory, or the better memory speed. The encoder, though, because it's a single encoder versus a single encoder, the encoder generation is newer, but as for raw performance, it isn't that much different in actual raw performance if you run the FFmpeg benchmark. Phil's not going to be able to stream a 4K, all right? He doesn't. His system just doesn't lack the performance or it lacks the performance. Phil would need to do serious upgrading to his PC in order to do that. Even upgrading his internet would probably be beneficial, but he can't get faster than 35 megabits on Comcast for upload. That's their max, even on business line. Even if he went to the highest line available in his area, which is a 1.2 gigabit line, it's still only a 35 megabit upload. There's no fiber in his area. So this streaming PC that Phil purchased really isn't good for what Phil wants to do. It's not that it's a lemon PC, it's that it's just not powerful enough. Like, Phil wants to multi-stream. It lacks the performance because it doesn't have that secondary encoder on the GPU. Now, what we're going to look at next is we're going to look at his camera and go over these USB issues that Phil has run into. I have the same camera as Phil. Bring this up here. A video capture device. Hey everybody, morning. It's 3 a.m. here in Edmonton. I have the exact same camera that Phil has, the Instalink 362C, right? And we'll get into this. Okay, now we're going to take a look at this camera issue, the USB issue, Phil's shitty microphone, everything like that. Now, I'm going to be playing a video here from a couple days ago when Phil's, this is when, 1 day ago. So, when Phil's camera shit the bed again. Now, if you haven't been aware of the issues that Phil has been having, ever since Phil got this streaming PC, we'll get into why the issue is occurring. But it pretty much is that Phil's USB ports shut down because he's just pulling too much power. He's got a really bad hub, a J5 Create. Phil showed this in one of his videos. It's not a very strong hub when it comes to power delivery, which causes a lot of issues. Phil then daisy chains an unpowered hub into this J5 Create, which in turn causes even more issues. So what we're going to look at here is the video from a couple days ago to explain what the issue is. We're going to show how bad the AI is that Phil uses. It's not technically AI, but let's just jump right into this.
All right, let me fix the camera now. Again, guys, it's not me. It's the tech is garbage. Really, the tech is just freaking garbage at this point. Camera just turning itself off for no dang reason. All right, let me try to get it working again. Stupid piece of garbage. All right, here we go. The year of tech difficulties is what we're going to call this. Some people call this year of the snake. I call it year of the fucking gremlins. Seriously, the tech gremlins, right? Just following me. Yeah, see? You tell me what's going on. I ain't nothing to just...
Okay, do you see the clipping and everything, like those white outlines? Phil is not using Nvidia Broadcast, and Phil should be using Nvidia Broadcast. We'll get into that here shortly on how to set that up really quick. It's very easy. There are ways to properly set it up. Now, Phil originally was using Nvidia Broadcast when he set up the system on his gaming PC that he got with the 4070 Ti Super. When he switched over to the 4070 Super, the streaming PC, the Skytech system, he got rid of the AI and he went for more of just a plugin. He no longer uses Nvidia Broadcast. Phil has admitted this. Probably because when he swapped over, Darziak didn't help him set up his Nvidia Broadcast. There is a new version of Nvidia Broadcast, which is kind of cool, but it's kind of shit at the same time.
Just turns itself off, freezes. What the fuck, man? All right, defense plus 9? Oh, we gotta give this to Gremio, because Gremio's a weakling.
Phil had a stroke.
It froze again? This is ridiculous. I have no clue why it's doing this. This is pissing me off. So hold on a second. Yeah, the camera, it won't even turn on in the software. I'm trying to use the software, and it's just erroring out endlessly. So I have no clue what's going on. Again.
Shout out to Memology for clipping this here, because I couldn't find this on Phil's own videos. I didn't really want to search through it.
And I'm not doing anything wrong, just the setup doesn't want to work. It's pissing me off, man.
I did nothing wrong. I did everything correct. No.
What sucks is there's nothing I can do to get it to work consistently. It should be working. It just doesn't want to. It just wants to fuck around and have issues. And I can't make the camera work. Like now I unplugged and replugged it. And now it's working in its own software. And it's following me around with the AI and everything. Here, let me turn off the AI for a second. So now I'm going to close this. And I'm going to get it to work again in OBS.
And it's like, dude, just look at that face. He's like, what am I supposed to do? I don't know why it's malfunctioning. It just doesn't want to work consistently. And yet, we've had tons of streams where it worked fine. Tons. With zero issue. And now it just wants to malfunction constantly. Like, what the fuck is wrong with this thing?
Here, let's discuss this really quick. Phil purchased a Shure SM7. It's the SM7 Plus, so this is even more expensive than what Phil said he had spent on. Now, for whatever reason, Phil is using USB, and the reason why he's using USB is because if he uses XLR, the RGB on the microphone doesn't work. Big whoop. Like, who cares, Phil, about the RGB on your microphone? XLR is better than USB in every way. You don't run into USB crosstalk issues, right? Phil gets clipping on his microphone because Phil has all the settings maxed out. He sits too far away from his microphone. It should only be within 4 to 6 inches of your mouth because it's a cardioid mic. Phil typically has it sitting about 12 inches or further away. He has to have all the settings turned up to 100% max so it can pick him up from that distance. With XLR, you would have better audio, better power delivery because it uses phantom power. It's better overall, and Phil doesn't understand it. So Phil downgraded because prior to the SM V7 Plus, he was using an XLR microphone.
What the fuck is wrong with this thing? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Will it work? Will it not work? It might freeze again, and I'm not causing it to freeze. Right? It's freaking running on the same thing I've been having. Oh, it did it again. Look at that. It froze immediately. What is even going on? It just turned off. What is going on? Piece of crap, man. This is the camera I was using. People are like, go to your old camera. This literally is the other camera I was using. I just moved the location. All I did was move it. It's not that it's a different camera, it's that it's just in a different position. Yeah, looks like I have frostbite fingers. You're right. Not the frostbite fingers. So now I unplugged and replugged it into the back of the camera. I don't know if that's any different. It didn't feel like it was loose. So I don't know what's causing it. And it's ridiculous. Look at that. Those frostbite fingers. It was working fine with the software. And then all of a sudden, it stopped working. And so weird. Turns on the AI is working. Look, it's fine.
Look at how bad that clip is. You see this here? This is very bad. Very, very bad AI. Now, what we need to look at is when the issue first began back in January, Darziak had told Phil that this is a Windows Update issue. It is not a Windows Update issue. So Darziak is subbed to my channel. And when I posted this, basically telling Phil how to fix this, and this is going to lead into the marathon yesterday when Phil had this magical email show up that explained everything to them, but really didn't. And whoever wrote this email, if it's real, I'm 50-50 that it was actually Darziak that wrote the email, but we'll get to that here shortly. What I want to look at is, I want to look at Darziak's post. Now, I explained what this was. This was the KB article here in question. We could actually bring, I actually have this right here. Now, Darziak posts on my thing and immediately gets flamed by everybody in the community. Like Steve the Dead came at him, everybody came at him. Now, Darziak claims it's not a Windows problem, but a Windows update is the problem. So it's a Windows problem. LOL, nice logic. We'll get into this here shortly. Now, the root issue is still caused by Windows Update. That is untrue. I ran into issues myself as my Nvidia broadcast stopped functioning by constantly restarting. I've never seen that, and I've used Nvidia broadcast since day one. So fix your PC. Where else is it? Because it gets really fucking funny here. So this is a good one. So DSP managed to survive for 10 years on Windows 8, so I think he'll be able to survive one update. Obviously, unstable my ass. I've never had programs act like that before, and it's all installed normally. Darziak, you have problems with your system, okay? I'm gonna put that over there right now. I've been upgrading my rig since the mid-2000s, and I took a college course, so I know most things on the computer. Darziak, I'm 43 years old. I'm the same age as Phil. I've been building PCs since I was 7. Okay? I've done this way longer than you have. So Darziak is pretty much the big issue, the actual technical issue is Phil and Darziak, because they both don't know what they're doing. So let's bring up, this is the article that Darziak had claimed that he had seen on the issue. So back in January 14th, Microsoft released an update, KB article 505.00009. Now, this update right here, this is the Reddit article that Darziak had shown Phil, and that Phil had talked about. They both didn't understand what this was. So this KB article, start to mute there, clear my throat. Unlike Phil, I just don't do that into the mic. This update focuses on Windows kernel vulnerable driver block list files. Now, what that means is Microsoft discovered that drivers can have vulnerabilities, right? That can allow people to gain access for malicious intent, okay? Like Phil would say. These updates are actually beneficial. You don't want somebody taking access of your computer without your permission and doing shady shit with it, right? So this update plugged a security hole. Now, Darziak wants to claim that this is an issue with Windows Update. I will show you a problem with Windows Update, okay? Now, what Insta did is after this driver update, after this Windows Update came out, Insta released a firmware update to fix their driver issue. So this is 100% an Insta problem, not a Windows Update issue. Okay, and Phil and Darziak kept blaming Microsoft, kept blaming Microsoft. It wasn't a Microsoft problem. Microsoft plugged a security hole. Insta then released an update for the camera that fixed the issue. Now, Logan K and I both theorized that the camera issue, Phil wasn't able to update the firmware properly, or kept erroring out, and Phil didn't understand the error, so Phil thought that he was updating the firmware to the camera. We don't think the firmware has updated correctly. Phil kept saying that the camera was bricked, and of course it wasn't. Once Phil rolled back the update, did the firmware update, everything worked. Now he's running into USB crosstalk issues in regards to power and bandwidth. Now, typically, you don't need to install the software for Insta, okay? But we're going to do that anyways. What I want to do is go to downloads, conferencing. Now I have the 2C. Phil has both the link and the link 2C. Now the link comes with the gimbal. I don't know why Phil has the gimbal. His fat ass just sits in the chair all day long. They don't need to see him. The camera doesn't need to follow him swinging back and forth on the X and Y axis. There's no real reason why he should be using the AI features of this camera, because it does use GPU resources, which Phil has already strived for. We went over that earlier. Now, download the InstaLink software here. Now, I don't ever install the software for, say, my camera or my microphone and everything. I control everything through OBS. The reason being is you can get compatibility problems when you're running two pieces of software. Running the Insta software, because Phil has multiple cameras from Insta, they have the same AI feature. So when Phil puts his hand up in front of the camera to make it follow him, that can trigger all the cameras. The software wasn't designed to differentiate between multiple cameras. It will in some sense, but with all the AI gestures, they're all the same for the cameras, so it ends up fucking up all his cameras all the time. If Phil wanted to run a multi-camera setup, he should have bought an Ozbot. Now, an Ozbot is the competitor to Insta, except the Ozbots are technically better in performance. It's just that they're expensive, okay? 92 is what I want. Now this camera I think is like, what is it, like $700 Canadian or something like that? $400 Canadian, okay? The Link 2C is like 270 Canadian or whatever. Or no, that was, I got mine for 170. I think it's like 200 Canadian. Like, this is way, way more expensive than the Link 360 or the Link 2 with the gimbal. I do find the Ozbots do give a better picture quality, like they are a little bit sharper. And these cameras are actually USB 3.0. So this is a USB 3.0 cable and everything, right? The InstaLink and the InstaLink 2C are only USB 2 cameras, right? So the Ozbot offers USB 3 transfer rates of 5 gigabits, whereas USB only offers 482 megabits, okay? Huge difference in performance, huge difference in power delivery. Same thing for the InstaLink 2C. Is still just a USB 2.0 camera. Now, for whatever reason, Phil went ahead, he replaced the USB 2.0 cable that he had with this to a USB 3, thinking that it would change the camera to USB 3. That's not how it works, Phil. This camera is USB 2. It functions on USB 2. It doesn't matter if you put it on a USB 3 cable. It doesn't matter if you put it in a USB 4 cable. It falls back to USB 2. All right? So let's get that out of your head. Now, I'm not going to install the software because I don't want to use the software on my system. Again, I would suggest that Phil not use the software either, not use any of the AI gestures, and just use the camera in OBS and control the settings through OBS. Don't use any of the AI gestures shit. It's just garbage. Now, I'm going to show you what a Windows Update issue actually looks like. Now, if I go to my network here, because I want to grab something off my NAS drive. Okay. Now, this issue cropped up when Microsoft came out with the 24H2 for Windows 11. If I try to click on this, I get an error, path not found. Okay. Network path was not found. There's an issue. We can fix this really quick. I'm going to open up GP Edit. Now, this is only available in Windows 11 Pro. If you're running Windows 11 Home and you're having this issue, you will have to do a registry hack. You'll have to open up regedit and do the settings through there. Now, what I'm looking for here is computer configuration, Windows settings, security settings, local policies, security options. And now I'm looking for what's called Microsoft Network Client Digitally Sign Communication. Digitally signed communication always. As you can see, it is not defined. I'm going to set this to disabled. Then there's one more setting we need to adjust, which is computer configuration, administrative templates, network, LAN workstation. And we are looking for enable insecure guest logons, and we're going to change that to enabled. Fine, okay. I'm going to refresh here really quick. Okay, now I'm going to go into my NAS drive, and I'm now connected. Oh, wow, right? Such a big problem. Now, this is an issue that Microsoft still hasn't fixed. This is an actual Windows Update problem. Okay, now I'm looking for this folder. Cut this because I don't want this on my NAS drive anymore. Okay, we're going to do the Nvidia broadcast. So I want to show you what AI should look like within OBS. Not the shit that Phil is using that looks like trash, it clips like crazy, doesn't work properly. it just looks like garbage. And then we're going to get into explaining the issues. Now, I'm going to install the new NVIDIA Broadcast. Now, this is just the base program. I do not suggest using this because this will really zap your GPU performance, especially even when you're not using, even when you're not gaming. This is really going to hit your computer hard. And this is kind of shit because, like, NVIDIA Broadcast is an excellent piece of software, but as of OBS 31, you can actually integrate it using the SDKs. Now, Darziak watched my video on the integration, and he helped Phil set this up originally. Phil, again, is no longer using NVIDIA Broadcast. Phil uses just a regular program that uses DirectML, which is technically AI, but I'm guessing Phil has it set to CPU rather than GPU because he just doesn't have the GPU horsepower, like I said earlier. Okay, NVIDIA Broadcast is now installed. We'll just start it up here. Now, of course, the new system looks a lot different. Okay, now we can enable microphone effects if we need be. I'm not going to because I'm not going to be using this. Pretty much I just want to show you guys the video effects. So here's the camera, right? Set to 1080p 30 right now. I can set it to 4K 30 because that's what the Link 2C and the InstaLink support. This changes to 1920 by 1080 at 60 FPS. So right now this is set to 60. Now with AI background removal, we can blur, right? We can replace or we can remove. So now we see that this is removed, right? Now, as you can see, there's no clipping being done within the AI removal, right? Now to get this working, actually, let's just take a look at some of the other stuff really quick here. So actually, let's bring up Task Manager so I can prove a point here. So we can see that with NVIDIA Broadcast running, I'm using 20% of my GPU, right? So that means if you're going to be gaming on your PC right now and you have NVIDIA Broadcast running in the background, you're zapped for 20 to 25% of your GPU already. That's going to cause issues, right? You're going to lose that performance in your game. Now, the new features are video noise removal, and if you turn this on again, you can see it jumps again in performance. We're almost at 30%, right? And this is just going to clean up any artifacting, but I kind of see, like, it doesn't feel like it's running at 60 FPS anymore. It feels like it's running slower. The eye contact one creeps me out. Now, I am looking over to the left, but it keeps putting my eyes forward. It looks fucking creepy. Vignette, don't really care. The virtual key light, I don't like it. I think it kind of, like, look, high GPU load, look at that. And just enabling the virtual key light, I'm using 92% of the GPU, right? So if you want to use this, you can. Now what you would just do is you would just close this down, open up OBS, okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to change this, because we're not going to be using this camera. We're going to be using the NVIDIA Broadcast. Yeah, I gotta disable the video effect, don't I? And it's not working. Hey, great. Probably the new version of OBS 31.0.2. just remove this really quick. Add video capture device. And there, it's working. Okay, so now we can see, right? I have no clipping or anything on my hands or anything. I don't have those white outlines that Phil does, because that looks fucking bad. Now again, with NVIDIA Broadcast running, this is going to be using more GPU horsepower than what you would really want. Phil wouldn't be able to do this because it would max out his GPU again. So that's why Phil has swapped over to the to using the USB 2, or to using the plugin instead of the NVIDIA Broadcast. So there is a way that we can fix this. So we're going to close, let's remove this again. Let's close this down. Let's uninstall NVIDIA Broadcast. We'll restart later. Now, the NVIDIA Broadcast SDK is basically what you would be using. Let's bring this up here. Now, instead of using the NVIDIA Broadcast, what they have is what's called the NVIDIA Broadcast SDK. Now, they have this for the 50 series, 40 series, 30 series, and 20 series only. Now, these newer ones, there is a current issue with the latest update with OBS. You do need to have the older versions of the NVIDIA Broadcast SDK installed. Otherwise, it won't work properly. So what I'll do is I already have these downloaded. So basically what you want to do is you want to download based on your GPU. So I have a 30 series, Phil has a 40 series. If you're dumb enough to purchase a 50 series, well, then you have a 50 series. So all I need is the audio effects and the video effects. Now I have these already downloaded here. So these are the old ones. Now I'm just going to install the, well, you know what, I'll install both. Why not? Now the bug that currently exists, because with the new SDKs, it changes the libraries. You need the old version installed. Otherwise, it will not work in OBS. There is going to be a fix in OBS 31.1. I need to restart the system. I knew that was going to happen. Okay, I'll do a quick restart here. Be right back. Okay, and we are back. Continue with the install here for the NVIDIA Broadcast SDKs. Okay, so now if I open up OBS again, now we can see that I do have a YouTube video running in the background for some nice ambient music. We can see that I'm using 8% of my GPU. Now, without NVIDIA Broadcast installed in the system, it's not sitting at 20%. So we'll open up OBS. I don't know how Phil runs his system like this, because it's so slow without like any type of power management tweaks, any type of performance increase. I don't know how it runs like this. I feel such an idiot. Oh, not display capture, video capture device. So that's the Instalink 2C, right? Now what we can do now is, instead of using NVIDIA Broadcast, we can add filters. The filter, and we can see NVIDIA Broadcast, right? Now, unfortunately, it doesn't work because of the missing libraries, because it is broken, right? So we have to now install the latest NVIDIA Broadcast SDK. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. It's a little tricky right now because of the library change and the change in OBS. And now it's working again. So what's cool about this is if we bring up Task Manager, and we look at performance, I'm only at 10% GPU usage with the AI background removal running, right? So that tells me that this is a much better way to enable settings for AI background removal instead of using a shitty plugin like Phil uses. This is actual AI removal. It utilizes my CUDA settings, or utilizes the CUDA cores within my GPU, and I am not blowing my GPU budget because they've adjusted it now and fixed NVIDIA Broadcast so that you can integrate it into OBS by using filters, which is awesome. Now, currently, like the vignette, the noise reduction, everything like that doesn't work. Like audio reduction does. Like if I had a microphone here for my camera, I don't have a microphone plugged in currently to my PC. I can then add a noise reduction, right? Let's see if I can actually bring it up here. Filters. So we got background removal, blur filter, NVIDIA blur filter. Audio, video. We do have the NVIDIA noise gates and everything, audio effects, so we can block out anything if we wanted to, right? If we had the microphone or whatever, we can then block out a noise suppression for NVIDIA integrated into the system with very little impact on your GPU, right? And this is what Phil should be using. Again, Darziak and Phil, they're stupid. They don't know what they're doing. His system is completely fucked up. Now, what I want to look at next is what happened yesterday, because yesterday during the marathon, this email had arrived in, and we're going to go over to exactly what caused Phil's problem, why he's having so many issues with his USB, and I'm going to give you guys a fix. So if you're suffering from the same issue, like you're having issues with USB shutting off, things dropping out, this is going to be a part to really listen to. Now, Alt had contacted me. Who else contacted me? Like a bunch of people on the Detractor Beam Discord messaged me because they thought I was the one that sent this email. It wasn't me. Okay, I did not send this email to Phil. I think it was either Darziak or Phil did this himself. But let's take a listen to this. And shout out to Raw Phil for this. King Jad sent me this clip because I had no clue what was going on. I pieced the fuck out because I got bored watching this stupid marathon.
There we go. Okay. So now everything's working. Let's hope that everything stays working. If stuff stop... Oh, what are the options? Dr. Lexus, you just got here? Oh, cool. Dr. Lexus just got here. He wants to know the shot options. All right. We got a lot today. You ready for this? So look at all these options you have. First of all...
Now, King Jad warned me when he sent this that Phil meanders a lot during this, but I really need to listen to this because I tried listening to some of it yesterday, and I was just laughing my ass off.
We have leftover shots from the marathon 2 months ago. We have 99 apples and 99 blackberries, both of which are like 47 proof or something crazy like that. Okay? Then we've got the new 99 lemonade pack, which includes strawberry lemonade, watermelon lemonade, pink lemonade,
peach lemonade, or raspberry lemonade. 5 flavors of lemonade, okay? Then we've got Fireball whiskey. So he's of the impression, any of the essential things I'm using for the stream, the capture device, the cameras, right? Those should be plugged directly into the motherboard. Other things, like for example, maybe these USB hubs I'm using, those should be plugged into the other USB ports. That's what this guy is saying, all right? So let's continue. Why do hubs and front USB ports suck? 100% of motherboards sold in the US are tested by manufacturer, but the hubs never are. If testing is done on hubs, they use a sampling technique where they test 5 out of a batch of 1,000, save for front port panels. The front ports of a PC case are manufactured by the lowest bidder and installed by the case manufacturer and shipped completely untested. The power...
This is not true, okay? They do go through rigorous testing based on the initial batch, and then every batch is then just purchased or manufactured and purchased as is, because that's just a copy of the original batch. Now, yes, you can run into issues. Again, I don't recommend using the front USB ports for anything. Actually, we're going to need to bring this up here. We're going to need to bring up Phil's motherboard again here.
Power to signal ratio of a front port is always worse because the power and signal has to transition through multiple connectors. And the front panel...
That's not true. It's one connector. Okay, now with your USB, we could bring this up here. Let's bring this up, this picture here. So on Phil's motherboard here, these are the connectors for basically your front panel, depending on what you are using. Let it be USB, USB 3 is right here, right? It's only one connector. Okay, there's not multiple connectors. I don't know what the fuck this guy's talking about. It's one cable that comes from the front USB hub and then plugs into the motherboard. Now, if you have USB 2, it would plug into the USB 2 one here. If you have USB 3, it will plug into the USB 3, which is right here. There's not multiple connectors. I have no clue what this person is talking about. Again, like, I'm thinking it's Darziak, trying to sound smart, but just sounding fucking completely retarded like usual.
Connector is often the furthest away from the motherboard. Traces of the hub PCBs are guaranteed half the size, if not thinner. Also, your...
No, the PCB layers and traces are... I'm not even going to get into it.
Cables probably suck. Why? Because by default, people grandfather old PC cables to USB. That I did not do, okay? I have high-grade cables that I'm using. All of the USB cables that I'm using for the cameras particularly are ones that say, like, the highest transfer rate, USB 3.2 or whatever, because I was buying a bunch of cables to try to run either that or the capture device across the floor, so they actually...
And that is not correct, because the highest transfer rate would be USB 4 or Thunderbolt 5. Phil is going to dox what cables he's using here right now, and then we're going to debunk that.
Are the highest grade USB 3.0 cables, okay? Admittedly, originally I was trying to run one of the cameras through a shitty USB 2 cable and it kept malfunctioning and wasn't even working properly. But once I got to the 3 cables, then it started working. All right, so...
That's probably because that USB 2 cable was bad.
The cables are good. These are all brand new cables that I'm using for the cameras. 100% bought just for these cameras, okay? And that shouldn't really be an issue, okay? He says, try Anchor or Belkin. I actually believe I'm using Anchor. I think they're Anchor cables. Hold on. Yes, Anchor. Oh.
Okay, so recommending Anchor or Belkin for data transfer is fucking dumb. So these are the transfer rates for Anchor cables. Now, Anchor doesn't sell USB 3.2, so I don't know what Phil's fucking talking about. They do have some 5 gigabit cables, but they don't sell these anymore. I can't find, like, was able to find one on their site, but Anchor and Belkin, they're primarily for charging. Now, when you look at cables from Anchor and Belkin, we can bring this up here. USB-C cables. These cables are all based off of USB 2 standards, okay? So they will offer you like 240 watt charging, but they will only function on USB 2 speeds. So that means 480 megabits per second, which is pretty fucking slow, right? you don't want. So this is a 240 watt charging cable, but it only transfers on USB 2 speeds. You can bring up even more. Right, so this is a USB-C 643 cable. Scroll down to the specs. Offers 100 watt charging and only transfers at USB 2 speeds. Let's bring up all cables, why not? Shop all cables. This is prime 240 watt charging cable. Transfers again at USB 2 speeds, 480 megabits. So when you're buying Belkin or Anker, you're buying them for charging. Now, when you plug it into a USB 2 device, it's going to offer the power transfer rate of that USB 2 device, as well as the USB 2 speeds. If you plug it into a USB 3.0 device, it's going to offer the power for the USB 3.0 device, but only transfer at USB 2 speeds. So effectively, Phil has purchased the wrong cables. Now, let's continue on with the video, and I'll recommend everything what Phil should have purchased and what you guys should be looking for.
They're Anker. The cables are Anker cables. I was right. So they are the good name brand cables, okay? Just make sure that the cable has the fastest data transmission. I think they do. I'm pretty sure I spent the money to get the ones that have the higher level data transmission, okay?
No, because there is no 3.2 cable from Anker, and the majority of the Anker cables are only USB 2 speeds. They only are designed for charging and power.
Now he says if you need longer cables, you need an active USB cable, which is USB transceiver on both ends with the cable being fiber optic. These will cost $100 to $200 each.
Phil's broken AI. Now, this is untrue. If you're going over, say, about 9 feet with USB, I do have a 16-foot cable here. It is not fiber optic. It is just regular copper. It works just fine. I'm using this for my capture device currently. Now, this system, what the guy is talking about here, is meant for, I'll bring this up actually. Now, I've recommended these cables before. I actually have this cable as well. And I just use it because if I want to sit on my couch and play Fightcade on my 120-inch, then I can just run the cable. It's a 65-foot cable. Now, these cables are not meant for what Phil is using it for. These cables are meant for basically for screens that operate over USB-C or Thunderbolt or USB 4. That's what these are meant for. Where is it? Where is it? 65 feet. It's early in the morning, guys, and I am beat. 10 gigabits. Is it here? AOC optical. So this is what this person is talking about here, whoever recommended this to Phil, because they're an idiot. This is meant for, like, transferring video 4K 60. This is meant for screens. Now, these are AOC optical cables, and they are active, so they get power from the USB port, and then they shunt that power through the cable to the other end to boost the signal. Again, these are not meant for like web cameras or anything like that. These are meant for running screens through USB-C or through Thunderbolt or through USB 4. I wouldn't purchase this for a web camera. It's overkill. They are way too expensive. This is, I think, is like $300 Canadian for these cables. Don't do that. Okay, do not purchase these cables just to run your web camera. Power-wise, delivery, it depends on the cable. Some of these cables don't really provide a lot of power. They're just meant for bandwidth. So that's their main feature, is to transfer video signals like 4K 60, which is going to require 18 gigabits of data transfer rate.
I am not spending $100 to $200 each for a webcam cable. Sorry, that's not happening. That's insane. I'm not going to spend $100 to $200 each.
This side camera makes him look so fucking poor, like so unhealthy, because it sits too low and it's now sitting too close. It just looks stupid.
For a webcam cable, that is absolutely wild. That's never going to happen, okay, under any circumstance. So, I don't care if there are really high-grade cables. I'm not going to drop hundreds of dollars on a USB cable. That's ludicrous, okay? I'm waiting to hear what Dr. Lexus wants me to take for the shot, by the way. Once he tells me, I will take the shot that I owe him, okay? Okay. Don't use adapters. Like hubs, adapters have no mandated testing requirements. You can have perfect USB power from the motherboard, perfect cables, and using an adapter, especially ones provided for free like the ones that come in the box with the peripheral, can bottleneck the USB.
That's not true.
You mean like this adapter that came with the USB camera that I removed because I didn't want to use?
I have this right now plugged in for my camera and it works just fine. I wouldn't recommend using adapters. Now, the adapter that the Link 2C comes with is perfectly fine. It is a USB 10 gigabit adapter, so it'll function perfectly fine. It'll provide enough power. The cameras themselves require 5 watts. I'll bring up Phil's hub right now because we're going to start talking about hubs.
Use an adapter? Basically, everything this guy's telling me is kind of like, I know, but it's kind of confirming the stuff that I already knew. Yeah.
It's not confirming anything, Phil. You're getting more confused and you're now just guessing because, again, I have the same camera that you do. I am using this adapter and my cameras function better than yours.
So I already took it off. This is a C to A adapter. And I was like, nah, if it's just C, I'm just going to use C. He wants me to drink Fireball? All right, I'll have a Fireball shot. I was like, I'm just going to use C then. And then I did. I'm using the C port with that cable. So there you go. So I'm with you. I'm with this guy. Okay? Now, he also says your power supply is fine. The number one symptom of that the power supply is garbage is uncommanded reboots. The motherboard has PWMs, capacitors, chokes, and VRMs that take pretty bad power and compensate real-time for fluctuations. Power man.
Oh my god. This is incorrect. The way VRMs function is they're step down, right? So it takes the full power through the 12 volt, or depending, like USB doesn't use 12 volt. USB uses the 3.3 and 5 volt rails. It's considered a step down. So what this does is it takes the full power and then it steps it down for the devices that it requires the power, right? PWM, typically PWM is used for things like PWM is used for things that are basically come down to like power control. So basically they're used for things like fans. Okay, that's why you see like PWM fans. What this guy's rambling on, he's just mentioning random stuff that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And of course, Phil's trying to sound smart himself without understanding exactly what any of this has to do with anything.
Management is where a ton of motherboard manufacturers do their R&D. The only thing you can do to fuck up the power is add a powered USB hub that uses shitty adapters and poor quality capacitors. So, FYI, I don't think I've had a single random reboot since I got the PC in December. So it's been almost...
Okay, so with power issues, it's not reboots, it's complete shutdowns. Like the computer will just shut off. Okay? Now, Phil has had that happen on his gaming PC already. Now, again, this power supply in this streaming PC, I have no idea what it is. I've never heard of CyberMax. So I don't know, right? I don't know the quality of it. They're just saying that it's a 750 watt gold.
Almost 3 months, right? And I don't think there's been a single random reboot. So maybe it's not the power supply then. And then he says, camera's overheating. I will add this to the end. I don't think this is the issue, but Insta360 is an action camera manufacturer. You're right. Insta360 specializes in cameras you put on a helmet or something for movement when you're doing sports and stuff. Action cams are notorious for going to thermal protection mode, which is to say shutting down mid-recording. Check your camera to see if it's warm to the touch.
Yes, my Insta does warm up when I'm using it. I've never, ever seen it shut down during use. Like, it holy shit.
Yes. Holy shit. This camera is warm as fuck. Wow. It's really, really warm. So could it be the camera then? Could it actually be the brand of camera is the issue? Because that's really warm. Like, I'm not even kidding. I wouldn't want to rest my hand on top of this camera because it's, oh yeah, it's warm, dude. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe the camera overheats. Huh. Well, so the two things that I'm getting from this email that are takeaways that definitely will help, okay? Takeaway number one, if possible, plug these cameras directly into the motherboard. Right now, this one is, This one currently is plugged into the front hub USB-C port, but if it malfunctions again, I will plug that directly into the USB-C port that's on the back of the computer. Okay, fair enough? That's what
Okay, so Phil is obviously using, because he only has one USB-C on the back of the computer, right? We know this, right? This is the only USB-C he has plugged in the back of the computer. So obviously he's using USB-A, an adapter to plug in his one camera, and then he's using USB-C on the front panel to plug in the other camera, because his capture card is supposedly plugged into this as well somehow. I don't know. This is just what Phil is saying.
what I'll do. I'll have both cameras plugged into the back. The other problem is my capture device, I have to use an adapter. It sucks, but the capture device itself only runs USB-C, but the back of my computer, the highest level USB port, there's only one, and it's USB-A. So I had to buy a C to A adapter. That's what it's supposed to be, like tested and working like that. I have to use an adapter for the capture device. There's nothing I can do about it. But in reality, I haven't had many issues with my capture device. For the most part, the gameplay always, see, it does.
Except the capture device shuts off. Now, the cable that Phil is using for his capture device does not support 10 gigabit, and that's why he can't capture at 4K 60. He has to have a 10 gigabit cable. We will get into those cables here shortly.
Doesn't really have a problem. My problems are usually the cameras, right? Okay, so I'm going to take the feedback this person gave me in the email, and I'm going to try to plug both cameras into the back of the motherboard, if possible. And also, I mean, yeah, the cameras run hot. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe these installing cameras just tend to overheat, and maybe that's the issue. I don't know.
No.
Okay, it is time for a shot.
Okay, so let's break this down. This is what is the actual problem that Phil is currently having with his system. Now, this is the J5 Create hub that Phil has plugged in. Now, Phil admitted that he bought this 10 or 11 years ago. Now, this hub only offers a total of 15 watts of power total. Okay? Now, with the 15 watts of power, it's divided up like this. This port here offers 12 watts of PD charging. Each consecutive port only offers 1 watt. So this powered hub is garbage, okay? Now, the other issue is, of course, Phil is using charging cables instead of using actual high-powered or high-bandwidth cables, because he's using Anchor cables that just only support USB 2.0 speeds. What Phil needs to do, and I know I've recommended these before, so let's bring these up. Now, Vantech's very, very good. I have one of these already. I actually have 2 of these. I have one on another computer. To go accessories, hubs. So these are your USB 3.0 hubs that offer 5 gigabits of transfer rate, right? Now, what Phil should be doing is he should be purchasing probably the 10-port hub. I have the 10-port and the 7-port hub. Now, each of these offers about 4 watts of power per port, right? And that's more than enough than Phil needs, because Phil doesn't run his cameras at 4K, so he's not going to need the full 5 watts. In turn, this would then plug into one of these ports in the back. One of these 2 ports. Don't use the USB 2 ports, because you're not going to get the data transfer rate, right? You're going to need that 5 gigabits. Phil can plug in his keyboard, his mouse, camera 1, camera 2, his Stream Deck, game controller or whatever, right? It doesn't matter. It's going to offer more than enough. Now, the other ones that I can recommend are the Sabrin. Now, it's not that I recommend Sabrin hubs. I'm not a big fan of these. Phil actually has this one here plugged in to his gaming consoles because he's an idiot. We've seen this in screenshots already. Sabrin hubs, they'll offer the 5 gigabits. They are power efficient. The power delivery is a little bit lower. I think it's about 3 watts of power per port. But I've run into issues with compatibility. I have mice that will not function on these for whatever reason, right? Specifically Logitech mice will not work when I plug them into these. These also have cool switches, so you can turn the ports on and off as you need. Again, these aren't very expensive, but I actually have a new one to recommend. Because I've purchased some of these for work, because we needed them for our CNC machines. Now, these hubs are awesome, but they're pricey. These hubs offer 7.2 watts of power per port. So that's more than enough to provide for, or 7.5 watts of power, sorry, per port. This is USB 3.2 Gen 1. And again, you would just plug it into this port here in the back of the motherboard, right? Choose the port that you want to use in the back of the motherboard. I would recommend using the least amount of ports as possible on your system. That's just for power issues and for bandwidth problems. This hub would function excellently. And it's got switches. Again, you can turn the power on and off. It comes with a USB 3.2 Gen 1 cable, but it's only 3 feet. Now, you can purchase cables because I do recommend StarTech for cables as well. Now, you can get USB-C and USB-C to USB-A, right? These offer anywheres from USB 2 speeds all the way up to USB 4 40 gigabits, right? So you just choose what you want. Like if I need USB 3.2, there we go, right? I could purchase up to, 6 feet, which is perfectly fine for my needs. Phil might need something longer. They do offer those. But this is your best bet for setting up your system. Now, this is how Phil needs to fix his system, right? Phil needs to, one, probably update the BIOS too. Like, let's check this really quick. So AMD adjacent enhanced PCIe compatibility. That's a benefit for Phil. Oh, this is a good one here. Improve system performance and reduce temperature with PBO. Address potential UEFI vulnerabilities. That's another good one. Improve system compatibility. Fix TPM 2.0 potential vulnerabilities. That's a good one. So, for Phil's setup, okay? The biggest issue, the technical problems, are all caused by Phil and Darziak, right? This is the biggest problem, is Phil and Darziak. They didn't know what they were doing. Darziak doxed himself, gave Phil a bad OBS profile based on Darziak's system. Phil, not knowing what he was doing, started messing with the settings that screwed up his system. The USB problems are all down to the fact that the motherboard itself isn't bad, it's functional, but it doesn't offer a lot when it comes to power management or USB functionality. These are the only two USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports. This one's USB 3.2 Gen 1. Phil's going to need to purchase a better hub, right? Which is, I'd recommend this one right here. This is what I actually have at work. These are excellent. Plugging into one of these two ports here, and plugging all his devices, all his cameras and everything, plug it into this, plug his keyboard and mouse, his Stream Deck, and his capture card plugs into here. Problem solved, right? This is very easy to do. And now, like I've done yesterday, I actually went ahead and offered to help Phil fix his system. What the hell am I getting? Oh, big fails. Cool. View your channel. So I made a community post yesterday. I offered, sent to Darziak, and I offered Phil, I'll fix the streaming PC for the same price Arturo Sanchez charges for installing FGC OS. $180 US. Right? Darziak, I'm serious. It'd be funny for Phil to pay a detractor for once, right? Imagine paying a detractor to fix his problems. Now, Phil is stupid, right? Phil has caused his own problems with his PC. Like, serious problems with his setup, right? Phil spent a lot of money on stuff that he didn't know what he was buying, right? The streaming PC isn't powerful enough to do what Phil wants it to do, right? It doesn't have a good GPU. Its motherboard is just bottom of the barrel motherboard. It's functional, it'll work. Darziak and Phil have screwed up his OBS. The image quality for his streams looks like crap. There's a lot of issues with Phil's setup, and these are mostly caused by Phil. Now, again, I haven't touched base on his network and RGB issue, and that is because I'm going to do that in a completely separate video, because again, this video has already gone on way too long. Way too long. Because I've gone ahead and I've purchased a actual router. Oh, TP link is good enough. I went and purchased this back in December because I did need a new router for myself. So I went and purchased this one here, the BE550 from TP Link. This router has saved my ass. Like, just saved my ass. So in the video, I'm going to be using this to debunk all of Phil's network issues, as well as the RGB problem. So just quick recap. Phil and Darziak screwed up his OBS. Darziak doxed himself to Phil, giving him access to Darziak's own YouTube channel. Phil's USB issues are caused by Phil. Plugging things in wrong, using an underpowered hub, purchasing the wrong cables, and just installing software that he shouldn't be installing, which is causing conflict between cameras. Again, this is easily fixed. Purchase a proper hub, plug it into the correct port on the back of the motherboard, plug everything into that hub. Problem solved. Now, I want to do the next video, the Wi-Fi video here. I want to do it this weekend sometime. Again, like, I've been doing this since, this video's been now going on since, like, the past 2-3 hours. Oh my god. Steve of the Dead video. So I got to get to work soon. It's 4:15 a.m. my time. I want to thank you guys for watching. Again, if I rambled, sorry. That's what I do. That's how I debunk Phil. I want to thank everybody from the community, and I'll catch you guys all in the next one.